Hey, welcome back again to Spooky Bricks, and happy October, the official start of the spooky season. Although on here it's pretty much always spooky season. But today we're going to be looking at my mock of the John Ward House of Salem, Massachusetts. The John Ward House often gets mistaken for the Witch House, which is understandable as they're both large old black houses built in a very similar style. But when you look at them side by side, the differences become more apparent. For example, the Witch House has this section in the middle that sticks out, giving it a third gable, whereas the John Ward House only has two gables. The house was built in 1684 and is one of the oldest surviving 17th century buildings in New England. Using a rough template as a guide, I began to lay out the first layer of the base with various dark tan plates. On top of that, I added a second layer of plates, again using dark tan, but I also began to sprinkle in some olive green plates as well. And finally, I put in the third layer, ensuring that the house had a nice strong base to sit on. Next, I laid in the foundation. It's primarily made up of regular gray plates, but I also added in some rounded plates too, to give it more of an aged, rustic appearance. At this point, I also started putting in some landscaping details. I had planned to put a tree out back with some red autumn leaves, so I placed a whole bunch of leaves all over that area. Now, it's important to do this before the tree is built, since once the tree is up, this section won't be very accessible due to all the branches getting in the way. I put a Technic axle up through the base to ensure that the tree trunk will be nice and strong. For the leaves on the tree, I used a combination of the red 3-leafed pieces and the leaves with the stem in dark red. Out front, we have a smaller tree which has scattered some orange leaves all over the ground. Combined with the oranges of the jack-o'-lanterns out front, it gives us a great Halloween style of color contrast with the blacks of the house. So although the John Ward House is mostly black, there is a little bit of a pop of color on the front and side doors, which are sort of a washed out teal color. I built the front door with various plates and tiles in dark turquoise with some accents in medium blue, which gives it a nice rustic wood plank type texture. For the side door, however, I just used a standard door piece. To mimic the look of the siding, I took advantage of the slight angle that's on the sides of the ingot pieces. If you place them in long lines end by end, they create an interesting, unique texture. The sides of the ingots catch the light just right, so that it really helps sell that siding texture. But of course, ingots don't have any studs on top, so the walls needed to be 2 studs deep in order to get the proper amount of connection points. The windows on the John Ward House have a diamond pattern to the panes of glass, so I recreated that with fence pieces on their sides with 1x1 trans clear plates plugged into the lattice. And then I used pieces like plates with door rails and plates with bars to create the frames for the windows. So let's move on to the roof. I like to experiment with different textures for my roofs, and I really like how the roof turned out on my Pioneer House mock. The partially attached tiles gave it a great vintage look, so I wanted to try out something similar for the John Ward House. Although for this roof, I did change it up a little by staggering the tiles as opposed to just lining them up straight like on the Pioneer House. Originally, I had planned to make the roof entirely out of light bluish gray tiles, but I didn't quite buy enough of them, so I added in some tiles in both dark gray and dark tan to fill it out. Even though it wasn't planned, it gives it a nice worn texture, so it all worked out. I kept the darker tiles more concentrated towards the top and sort of faded them down, which I think works much better had I just randomly scattered them throughout the roof. The gables were a little tricky as it took some trial and error to get the plates to fit together as snug as possible. I then added some long tiles along the seams to cover any remaining open areas between the plates. When you have two sets of plates coming together at two different angles, it's just not gonna line up perfect. At the peak of the gables, I used some bar pieces to fill in the gaps. And at the peak of the main roof, I used plates with rails to do the same. The chimney on the John Ward house has a fairly complex design with a lot of staggered angles and ledges. I recreated it as accurately as I could using some studs none on top techniques combined with some textured masonry bricks. And as usual, I used a combination of dark red and reddish brown for the colors. I used the same technique I first tried out on the Daniel Bray house of covering the windows with tissue paper. So when the house is lit up, it both covers the emptiness of the house and diffuses the light nicely. And you can see this MOC in person in Salem right on Essex Street. Although October in Salem gets very nuts, so if you don't already have plans to go, I definitely wait till after the Halloween season. That will be it for this video. Thank you for watching, and make sure to do all that YouTube stuff, all the liking and subscribing and all that, and stay tuned for more spooky builds.